Hi and welcome to this video guys. In this video we will be learning different types of operators in C. So we will be learning pre-increment and decrement operators, post-increment and decrement operators, and finally the logical operators in C. So let's begin. Before getting into the code, I would like to explain you the concept of pre-increment first. As you can see, we have input 5. We applied pre-increment operator and output gets increased by 1. So from 5 to 6, this is a pre-increment. The value of the variable is immediately increased. But the concept of post-increment is different. As you can see, we have input 5. We applied post-increment and at output, the value remains same as 5, but it increased in the next line. So that is the concept of post increment. First it uses the current value and the increment happens afterwards. And now let's get into the code for further clarification. On the very first line, I am going to write the title of the code, which is increment operators and decrement operators. Basically these are pre-increment and pre-decrement operators. As you know, first we have to include the stdio library, and then we have to write the main function, which is int main, and type these two curly brackets and type return 0 at the end of the code. And as you know, we have to define variables first. So I am defining int a is equal to 5, and here I am writing as comment variable definition. Okay, now let's print the value of a before any increment. So I am typing here the value of variable a, or value of a before increment is, since we are using integer data type, so I am typing here %d, and here I am writing comma a. And now let's run this code. The value should be 5, and in terminal we can see the value of variable a is 5. Now let's apply the pre-increment. So here I am typing printf, and in between these brackets and inverted commas I am typing the value of a after increment, or you can say at increment on this specific line, which is line number 11. So I am typing here %d, and I am writing here plus a, which is used for pre-increment. Now let's run this code and let's see the value of a on increment. So as you can see, since this is pre-increment, so this immediately increases the value of a by 1. But this is not the scenario for the post increment, which we will be learning right after the decrement. So let's see how the pre-decrement works. So here I am defining the variable b and assigning the value 10, and here I am writing the value of b before decrement is %d. %d is basically the format specifier for integer data type, and let's call here b. And we know the value of b is 10, and before applying any pre-decrement operator, the value must remain the same. And now let's apply the pre-decrement operator on this line. So I'm writing here the value of b after decrement, or you can say pre-decrement, is minus b. And now let's run this code, and the value should be 9. And it is, which shows the immediate effect of pre-decrement. Now let's learn the post-increment and post-decrements. On this stage, we have learned that on pre-increment, the value immediately increases by 1 on the same line, and the value immediately gets decreased by 1 on the same line by applying the pre-decrement operator. But this is not going to be the case for post-increment and post-decrement. So let's write the code for that. Here I am writing the comment, the title of the code, increment operators and decrement operators, and let's include the stdio library. And I am here quickly writing the main function. Okay, now as you know that we always have to declare the variables first. So we have to define these variables. A is equal to 5 and let's say b is equal to 3. And as we know that before applying any post increment or post decrement operators, the value remains same. So let's verify that first. So I am writing here value of variable a before applying any incremental operators, and here I'm calling a. And now let's run this code, and the value must be 5, and it is 5. So we have verified that. And now let's apply the post increment operator here. So I am typing here printf, and in between these brackets and inverted commas I'm typing value of a at increment, which is actually post increment, is %d, and here I am typing a plus plus for the post increment. And now let's run this code, and as you can see the value remains 5 even applying this increment. And let me recall, we have learned that if we apply pre-increment, which is plus plus a, the value gets increased by 1 immediately. But this is not the case for the post increment. So let me rewrite it as a plus plus and again run this code, and as you can see the value remains 5. And it is because the value gets increased in the next line. So I am writing on the very next line printf value of variable a after increment, or you can say post increment, is %d, and let's print the value of a here, and here it should be 6 because this is the next line, and we know that the post increment means that the value gets increased on the next line, and here you can see the value gets increased in the next line. We have printed the value before applying the post increment operator. On this line we have applied the operator and the value didn't change, it remained the same, and on the very next line the value gets increased by 1, and that is the reason why it is called as post increment. And now let's see the logic for the post decrement. Here I'm only changing the sign from a plus plus to a minus minus, and as you can see it is decreased by 1 on the very next line. And now it's time to learn about the logical operators. We have 3 logical operators, and the first one is AND. The output of AND operator is 1 when all inputs are 1. We have the second operator OR. The output of OR is equal to 1 when any of one input is 1. And the NOT operator's output is 1 when all inputs are 0. Now let's see how we can use them in C coding. So on the very first line, I am writing the title of the code, which is logical operators and or not. Okay, and here I am going to include the library first. So I am writing hash include stdio.h, and I am writing the main function, which is int main, and in these curly brackets I am writing here return 0. Now let's define the variables first. So I am using the integer data type variables a is equal to 1 and b is equal to 0. And let's see first how we can use the AND operator. So here I am writing the command for AND operator. As we know that the value of AND operator is going to be 1 when all inputs are 1. But here we know that a is equal to 1 and b is equal to 0. So let's print the value of those. AND operator is written like this: A and B inside of these brackets. Now let's run this code, and it must be 0 because both inputs are not 1, and it is. Now let's make this input as 1. Now we know that all inputs are 1 and it must return 1, and it is. So it is verified that the value of AND operator at output is going to be 1 only when all inputs have the value 1. And now let's verify the OR operator. If any of the value for the input is going to be 1, it must show 1 in the output. And we have input A and B. And in order to write OR operator, we use these two pipes between these two inputs A and B. And now let's run this code, and it must be 1 for the output for OR operator, and it is. So in order to differentiate between these two output and terminal, I'm here writing AND operator and OR operator, and for OR operator it is 1, and it must be 0 when all inputs are 0. So I'm making A and B both 0, and as you can see at the output OR is 0 as well. And when any of the input is 1, the OR must output 1 at the output. And now let's verify the code for the NOT operator. So I'm writing printf, and in between these two brackets and inverted commas, backslash n for the next line, not colon %d comma. For NOT operator we type two brackets, and here type the first input and b, and outside this bracket we type this symbol for NOT. Now let's run this code, and as we know that the value of NOT operator is going to be 1 when all inputs are going to be 0. It is reverse of AND operator. If any of the input is high, or you can say if any of the input has value 1, the NOT operator has the value 0. And here I'm making A0 and also B0, and NOT operator must have value 1 because all inputs are 0. So that's all for this video on operator, guys. In the next video we will be learning more about operators and some practice tutorials. See you in the next video.